ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. So last video I have discussed about the cranial nerves and their foramens in cattle skull. So in this video I am going to discuss about the cranial nerves and their foramen in horse skull. So this is the ventral surface, the diagrammatic representation of ventral surface of horse skull. So before going to the cranial nerves and the foramen, we should have thorough knowledge about the bones which are involved in formation of floor of the cranial cavity. So these are the bones which are involved in the formation of cranial cavity. So coming to the first bone, the occipital bone, it forms the posterior part of the cranium. So the occipital bone consists of condyles. So this is the condyle, and as well as this is the paramastoid process. So in the horse skull, these condyles are laterally placed, and this paramastoid process they are longer and narrower. So between the condyles and as well as the paramastoid process, we will get condyloid fossa. So this fossa consists of hypoglossal foramen. So through which our 12th cranial nerve, the hypoglossal nerve, will passes. This is similar as in case of cattle. So next, coming to the facial nerve. So between, this is the tympanic part of petrous temporal bone. Okay. Here you will get a mastoid process. Between the tympanic part and as well as the mastoid process, we will get stylomastoid foramen, through which the facial nerve, the second cranial nerve, will arise. Okay. And coming to the vestibulocochlear nerve, so it won't arise from the cranial cavity. It enters the internal acoustic meatus and lodges in the internal acoustic meatus. So what is the difference, between the horse and as well as the cattle means that is the foramen lacerum. So in case of horse, this foramen lacerum is a large triangular gap. So again, this divided into the anterior part and as well as the posterior part. So anterior part and posterior part are separated by a dense fibrous connective tissue. So here you can see. So this is the dense fibrous connective tissue which separates the anterior and as well as the posterior part of the foramen lacerum. Okay. The posterior part, it is also called foramen lacerum posterius or jugular foramen, through which the glossopharyngeal, vagus and as well as spinal accessory nerve will arises. Okay, here the major difference is here. Okay, the anterior part, this is the anterior part. The posterior border of the presphenoid bone, in front of the occipital bone, we will get the sphenoid bone. Again, in sphenoid, we will get post-sphenoid bone. Post-sphenoid bone consists of body. This is the body of the post-sphenoid bone. These are the wings, two wings, temporal wing of the post-sphenoid bone. The posterior border of this temporal wing, they form notches. These are the notches. Okay, these notches are covered by dense fibrous connective tissue, leads to the formation of three foramen from medial to lateral, that is carotid foramen, foramen ovale or oval foramen, spinous foramen respectively, from middle to lateral. Okay, so in case of cattle, the foramen ovale is present at the middle of the temporal wing of post-sphenoid bone, but here it is present at the middle of these three foramens. This is the major difference. So through carotid foramen, so the internal maxillary artery will come. So through foramen ovale, the same as in case of cattle, the mandibular branch of trigeminal nerve arises. Through spinous foramen, the middle meningeal artery will come. So coming to the next foramen, so anterior to the temporal wing, we will get foramen rotundum. So through which the maxillary branch, the second branch, the maxillary branch of trigeminal nerve will arises. Okay, so next, the anterior border of the temporal wing, of post-sphenoid, and as well as the posterior border of the orbital wing of presphenoid, they form notch and foramen called foramen orbitale. This is the new foramen. Okay, foramen orbitale. So through which the oculomotor, third cranial nerve, supratrochlear, ophthalmic branch, that is the first cranial nerve, first branch of fifth cranial nerve, and abducens nerve will arise. So between the body and as well as the orbital wing, we will get optic foramen through which optic nerve will arise. So adjacent to this optic foramen, we will get ethmoid foramen, so through which ethmoid nerve and artery will arise. Coming to the anterior part of the cranial cavity, which is formed by ethmoid bone. This ethmoid bone consists of three parts: cribriform plate, perpendicular plate, and as well as lateral masses. So this is the cribriform plate, separated by a crust called crista galli or ethmoid crust. So this consists of sieves through which the olfactory nerve fiber will arise. So this is similar in case of cattle, also same. So the first cranial nerve through sieves of the cribriform plate of the ethmoid bone. The second cranial nerve is through optic foramen, that is optic nerve. But the third cranial, fourth cranial, and the first branch of fifth cranial nerve, and as well as the abducent nerve here is through foramen orbitale. But in case of cattle, it is foramen orbitorotundum. So this is the major point you need to remember. Then coming to the through foramen rotundum, that is the maxillary branch of trigeminal nerve will arises. Then the foramen lacerum again divided into two parts, the anterior part and posterior part. Through anterior part, oval foramen is there, so through which mandibular branch of trigeminal nerve will arise. Then through stylomastoid foramen, we will get facial nerve. And the posterior part of the foramen lacerum, we will get 9th, 10th and 11th cranial nerve, that is glossopharyngeal, vagus and as well as spinal accessory nerve. Vestibulocochlear nerve won't arise from the cranial cavity, so it enlarges in the internal acoustic meatus. So between the condyle and as well as the paramastoid process, we will get hypoglossal foramen through which hypoglossal nerve will arise. This is the major difference between the cranial nerves and the foramens in cattle skull and as well as the horse skull. Thank you.